Hello, and welcome to today's episode in the Get Unstuck series. I'm Sarah Archer. I'm a career and leadership coach. If you haven't done one of my Get Unstuck episodes before, you're very welcome. If you are here with me live, do say hello. Do pop where you're calling from, where you're listening from, rather, in the comments. And I run these sessions, these very quick 15-minute practical sessions on various leadership topics, career advancement topics, because I know it's very hard to find time to think about these things when you're a leader and you have a very busy day job. So I just wanted to give you a little window in a lunchtime just to have a little think about some of these topics. And they're always very practical. There's always something you can take away and implement straight away. I also have a podcast called Unstuck and Unstoppable, and you can also catch the same topics there if you haven't got time to listen live with me today. So today we're talking about the unwritten rules of leadership and how to navigate them. And this topic came up because I was working with a client recently. Hello, Rose. You're very welcome here. It's nice to have you on the call. I was working with a client recently who kind of came to the session feeling quite frustrated, and she was doing everything well. She was delivering results. She was working really hard. She was leading well, getting positive feedback, but feeling like she was being overlooked. And she said to me, I feel like there's a game being played and I just don't know the rules. And it kind of struck me that in a way she's right, that there are these unwritten rules of leadership, and often as women we just don't know about them. And what we tend to do is just get our heads down and work really hard. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is the 4 unwritten rules of leadership, and why that approach of just getting your head down and working really hard just doesn't cut it, doesn't work if you want to progress in your career. And if you've got questions for me on this topic, just pop them in the chat and I will answer them as we're going along. But just think about, has this been a frustration for you in your career progression? Are you somebody who just tends to think, right, I'm just going to deliver, work really hard, and my work will speak for itself? There is a name for this approach. It's called, you may have heard about it, it's called the tiara effect. So that working really hard and expecting the kind of tiara to be placed on your head in terms of promotion. Also sometimes known as the myth of implicit meritocracy. So it's just, I'll get promoted if I just do what I'm meant to do in my role. And it sounds very logical, doesn't it? And I know I was guilty of this when I was in my HR career. I was just guilty of kind of thinking, I'll just work really hard. They'll see how great I am and I'll get offered that next role or that next promotion. But at this level, it's not just about performance. It's also about visibility. It's about influence. It's about perception. And it's about strategic value. And that's what we're going to be exploring today. So the first rule is that visibility matters more than effort, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? But I mean, effort, of course, matters. You've got to be performing well. You've got to be delivering. I'm sorry, that's my dog barking. But it is important to be thinking about your visibility. And this isn't in a self-promotional way. It's in a strategic way. And often when I'm working with clients around this, they sometimes say to me, well, it feels like bragging and I don't feel very comfortable with that. My work really should speak for itself. Or they might say, I don't have the time for that. I'm too busy delivering for my clients, managing my team. Or they might feel, I do that for my team. I promote what they're doing. My manager should be doing that for me. The truth of the matter is, though, is that, no one's going to be as interested in promoting your career and developing your career as you are. And you have to take control strategically, because senior leaders can't promote what they can't see. So if you're not talking about what you're doing, you're not advocating for yourself, you're not speaking up in meetings, sharing outcomes, not just doing the work, sharing ideas, not just delivering tasks, and talking about the challenges and the complexity of what you're doing, then they can't see the value that you're bringing. So maybe it's good to reflect, are you doing great work, but not really sharing what you're doing, how you're doing it, what you're achieving? So that's the kind of first thing to reflect on. Are you really talking about the value that you're bringing to the people that matter in terms of decision making around promotions or career development? Our second rule is that relationships shape opportunities, because careers aren't built in isolation, and senior roles are filled based on trust, confidence, and familiarity. And when I talk to clients about this, often there's a bit of resistance here in terms of, I don't want to have to kind of play that political game. And I completely get that, but we need to reframe it that it's not about politics, it's about connection. Because you need to be thinking about, within the organization, who knows what I'm doing, who trusts me, who would advocate for me in a room when I'm not there, and are you actively building relationships with potential sponsors, potential mentors, potential allies, or advocates for you? And I'm not talking about having to do this with all the senior leadership team in the business. This is about identifying the 2 or 3 key people in your organization who are decision makers and who could open doors for you. And do they really know you? Are you building those relationships? And this can also be relevant externally as well. If you're thinking about your next move that might not be within the organization, it might be outside the organization, but you still need to be building those relationships that will help shape opportunities. Then our third rule is that strategic thinking gets rewarded. And this is about moving from the operational to the strategic thinking and demonstrating that. And this is often where clients that I work with feel a bit stuck. And I've experienced this as well. I remember when I was going for my first HR director role, and I was looking externally, I went for an interview for a job that I just thought, yeah, this is my job, I could definitely do this, and got rejected after the first interview. When I reflected on it, I was thinking, okay, I can see that I was talking more about kind of my operational effectiveness than I was about my strategic thinking and the value that I was bringing. And I had to do a real kind of identity shift. And it's a tough one. I did a podcast episode on this, which I'll link to in the comments, which is about moving from operational to strategic thinking. And it's tricky because it's our comfort zone, the operational piece. We feel, it's tangible, we can deliver results, whereas the strategic thinking piece feels a bit more nebulous. And it can feel a bit daunting to have to move from doing to thinking, from tasks to impact, from now to the future. And being able to show that kind of radical responsibility in terms of solving wider organizational problems. But that's what senior leaders are looking for. They're looking for people who can think beyond the day-to-day, who can show that capability around adding value to the strategy, to the strategic objectives of the business. And it can be a simple shift just in terms of language. It can be talking about, here's what this means for the business, or here's the risk I see if we go down this particular avenue, or here's what we should do if we want to implement this in Q1. So it's sometimes just a language shift that shows that you are doing both delivery, but also thinking about the strategic impact of what you're doing. So be honest with yourself. Are you somebody who's kind of stuck in delivery mode, or are you making time for that strategic thinking? And then our fourth rule is that perception drives promotion. And this one can feel a bit uncomfortable as well, but it's definitely important because decisions are made based on questions like, do they look ready? Do they sound confident? Can they operate at the next level? And this is where something called executive present kicks in. And I have done a podcast episode on this, which I'll link to as well. I also have a free resource around developing executive presence. And there's lots of research out there that tells us that executive presence is one of the key deciding factors in promotion decisions. And this isn't about being loud. It's not about being dominant, but it is about developing that calmness, that confidence, that credibility that speaks for itself. And the question maybe to ask yourself here is, if I went and asked your leadership team right now, do they see you as ready for the next level? What would they say? And this is something, again, that's kind of quite easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's something that you can think about, small shifts that can make a big difference to how you're perceived in the organization. So let's just recap on the 4 unwritten rules of leadership. So we've got visibility matters more than effort. Relationships shape opportunity. Strategic thinking gets rewarded. And perception drives promotion. And what I want you to take away is this isn't about working harder. It's not about adding more to your to-do list. It is about some shifts, small shifts that you can make that signify that you are operating at that next level. So what I would challenge you to do is to think about, just this week, what is a small shift you could make in one of those 4 unwritten rules areas, perhaps the one where you think you're not as strong. What's one shift you could make? And that could be something about how you're showing up at a meeting. It could be about the way and you share your thinking and to whom. It might be about making a connection with somebody who doesn't know you but needs to know you. It might be about showcasing that strategic thinking that you are doing, but maybe you've been keeping to yourself. So just think about one thing you could do this week going into next week, because we're already on Wednesday, that would signify that, and building a bit of a plan for yourself about how you're going to navigate those 4 unwritten rules. So I hope that you found that useful. I hope that's resonated with you. I'd love to hear from you. So if this is something that you are working through now, do let me know. Send me a direct message. I always reply to people, and I will link to those 2 episodes that I referenced and the free resource I have on developing executive presence. And do let me know how you get on. Thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you at my next session in 2 weeks' time.